Welcome to our second annual Cook County Historical Society presentation of Stories That Matter, Women of Cook County. My name is Katie Clark, Director at the Historical Society, and I'm very happy to be here today with Dennis Waldrop. He's our Museum Manager and Archive Specialist, Aaliyah Markson, the Johnson Heritage Post Art Gallery Manager and Finance Assistant, Lois Clay, Johnson Heritage Post Art Gallery Assistant, and Laura Dernberger-Grunow, Community Engagement Manager. We're excited to be able to share more stories of Cook County women. All too often, it's the stories of women that are underrepresented in history. Women in this region had full lives, skills, and passions, and we want to tell those stories. In creating these presentations, we were able to highlight our mission and demonstrate a bit of the work that it takes to collect, preserve, and share our stories. For the women featured here today, we had varying levels of information on them in our collections. Darragh Aldrich. She was a prolific writer, author, and celebrated radio commentator with WCCO, who spent a lot of time up here in Cook County highlighting the region in her writings. For Darragh, our collections did not hold much information, so we had a bit more research to do, which now will be added to our archives. Andrea Peterson. Andrea was a distinguished teacher who changed the field of teaching in the region and beyond, and contributed many positive changes both as mayor and as volunteer for many area organizations. Our collections held several images and articles detailing Andrea's life and contributions. We had less research to do to feature her here today, but we also were able to speak with her daughter, thank you, Jean, to verify a few details, and again, all of this will be added to our collections. Betsy Bowen. Betsy is known nationally as a visual artist and illustrator, and she continues to enrich this community with her skills, talents, and involvement. We know as an organization that we would like to start building up our collections in areas that are not well represented, and one of those areas is the last several decades, basically the 1950s and on. Today, with so much information, images, articles, etc., going digital, much less has come our way. We had little on Betsy, so we went the way of interviewing her and using her as a primary resource. In addition to what we gathered from Betsy and other sources, we hope to add to that over the next few years with a new emphasis on active collecting. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dennis Waldrop, and he will be featuring Darragh Aldrich and Andrea Peterson. Thank you.
Clara Chaplain Thomas Aldrich, better known by her pen name Darragh Aldrich, was born on December 31, 1884, and passed away on March 31, 1967. She exhibited her literary talent early, writing her first complete story at the age of 8. Throughout her career, Aldrich made significant contributions as a teacher, playwright, journalist, poet, renowned novelist, biographer, and radio commentator. In 1914, Aldrich married architect Chilson Darragh Haynes Aldrich. 4 years later, in 1918, the couple first visited Cook County, Minnesota. They cherished their time together, often enjoying canoe trips through the wilderness, which likely inspired some of her literary work. Darragh pursued higher education at the University of Minnesota, arriving in the late 1890s. She graduated cum laude with her Bachelor of Arts degree in 1900. During her time at the university, she was actively involved in campus journalism, serving as an editor for the Gopher and occasionally contributing to the Minnesota Daily. Following her graduation, Aldrich dedicated 3 years to teaching the classics at St. Mary's Hall in Fairwald, Minnesota. From 1906 to 1915, Darragh made her mark as a special reporter and columnist for the Minneapolis Tribune. She distinguished herself as the first woman columnist in Minneapolis and also served as the Sunday editor for the Minneapolis Morning Tribune. Aldrich's writing extended beyond Minnesota, as she contributed to various New York newspapers and magazines. One of her most notable works was a regular column titled Quentin's Corner, which she wrote for 10 years. The column was widely believed to be authored by a man, and Quentin was admitted into the National Humorist Society. However, once it was revealed that Quentin was actually Darragh, she was forced to resign from the society due to its gender-based restrictions at the time. In 1917, she published her first novel, Enchanted Hearts, The novel quickly gained attention and was adapted by George M. Cohan for the Broadway stage in 1918 under the title A Prince There Was. The success of the stage adaptation led to a silent film version released in 1921, and the story was eventually reproduced for radio, showcasing Aldrich's wide-ranging influence across multiple entertainment mediums. Shortly after leaving the Minneapolis Tribune in 1915, Darragh embarked on a prolific writing career. She explored various genres, including novels, short stories, nonfiction books, and plays. Her first nonfiction work, The Real Log Cabin, was a collaboration with her husband and marked her debut in this genre. The book, aimed at city dwellers dreaming of building a log cabin retreat, is known for its wit and engaging anecdotes. A newer edition, published in 1994, includes expanded text and commentary by Harry Drabick. In other nonfiction work, Darragh Aldrich authored a couple of biographies. In 1942, Darragh published The Story of John Deere, and in 1950, Lady-in-Law, a biography of Maybeth Heard Page, came out. Page was one of the first women to serve in the Minnesota State Legislature. Lady-in-Law sketches 75 picturesque and dramatic years as seen through Page's eyes and details her career in the legislature and her work with the suffrage movement prior to 1920. Two other notable works are her novel The Red-Headed Schoolma'am and Girl Going Nowhere, which tells the story of a Minnesota woman who faces ostracism due to her father's radicalism and eventually finds love despite societal challenges. Several of Aldrich's books are set in the Arrowhead region of Minnesota, reflecting her deep connection to the area. Peter Good-for-Nothing begins as a play before being adapted into a novel. The story examines a romance set into the life of Minnesota lumber camps. Her novel, Earth Never Tires, vividly describes the rugged beauty of the land. Some Trails Never End is dedicated to the village of Grand Marais and gives readers an immersive experience, capturing the essence of the region's natural allure and the resiliency of its people. These works capture the beauty and spirit of the region she cherished. In 1941, Darragh Aldrich began her role as a WCCO radio commentator in Minneapolis, where she was appointed head of women activities, a position she held from 1941 to 1956. She hosted the popular show Callin' All Women and was widely considered the First Lady of Northwest Radio. While at WCCO, she also hosted the Darragh Aldrich Show, which includes interviews with famous people who visited the Twin Cities, music, friendly talks, household hints, and information about national and community projects that enlist public support. During her time as head of women's activities at WCCO, Darragh Aldrich played a crucial role in two of the most dramatic events in Northwest history. During World War II, she provided much-needed reassurance to women and girls eagerly seeking news about their loved ones in the armed forces. She frequently interviewed military personnel and International Red Cross workers, aiming to alleviate anxieties. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, amid the devastating polio epidemic, Darragh continued her important work. As thousands were affected and deaths mounted, she delivered vital information and offered comfort to her listeners throughout the region, helping to manage their fears and uncertainties. In 1918, Darragh Aldrich and her husband Chilson arrived in Cook County on the SS America. They were part of a movement celebrating a return to nature. After exploring various wilderness areas, they decided to focus on discovering Cook County. Chilson designed and built several cabins along the shore, including Darragh's writing cabin, Crow's Nest, in an area that they named Powell's Cove. In 1941, Darragh was asked to write something in the Cook County News Herald, and this is the subject she chose. About a month ago, I was alighted from the bus. Someone who had been watching the big Greyhound slide into place remarked, "Well, here comes the tourist." My heart sank to a new low. After 23 years of spending from 3 to 6 months on the North Shore, after buying property soon after we arrived in 1918, after paying taxes ever since, property and personal, and after my writing stories and books about this beloved land, we were still rated tourist. When, I demanded of the speaker, does one become first class? Even 23 years ago, when we made our first trip by the old SS America, we felt far from being tourists. Then we were adventurous pioneers, braving the unknown, or so we felt it. Every experience since that time has been a precious one because it has made us feel more intimately one with this wonderful country and its splendid people. Proudly, we give this address as our home, along with the Minneapolis one, and all biographical data requested of us. Darragh and her husband spent many years in Cook County, frequently retreating to their private cluster of cabins hidden by a secretive path. When not writing, Darragh indulged in reading biographies, philosophy, and significant novels. She also loved engaging with town life and exploring the wilderness by canoe. According to a 1941 Minneapolis Tribune article, Darragh had covered over 3,000 miles on canoe trips into the Arrowhead Wilderness. Both she and her husband cherished these wilderness adventures and developed a close friendship with John and Cheeky-Whis Linkletter, which was later reflected in her 1936 novel, Earth Never Tires. Darragh's publications have been cited in numerous works, including Timothy Cochrane's Mignon, The Good Place. Cochrane also explores the friendship between the Linkletters and the Aldriches in Making the Carry, The Lives of John and Cheeky-Whis Linkletter. Darragh passed away at the age of 85 in 1967 and is buried at Lakewood Cemetery in Minneapolis. The Elmer L. Anderson Library at the University of Minnesota holds a collection of Darragh Aldrich's manuscripts, including plays, short stories, and a novel. We are fortunate to have Darragh's rich stories, many featuring familiar characters and places, to remind us of the special region in which we live. Andrea Peterson. Born Andrea Marie Anderson on September 12, 1938, and died January 5, 2021. Born in Fort Dodge, Iowa, to Issel Shoup and Christian Anderson, the Andersons moved to northern Minnesota near Duluth when Andrea was in the 9th grade, after years of vacationing there as a family. On August 17, 1957, she married David Peterson, beginning a shared journey of 63 years together. Andrea Peterson's legacy is a testament to her lifelong dedication to education, community service, and conservation. Her achievements as a teacher, civic leader, and author have left an indelible mark on the North Shore community. She was also a loving wife, mother, and grandmother who cherished spending time with her family and instilled in them a love for travel, the arts, and education. Andrea and Dave had 4 children, Colleen, Jessica, Jean, and Christopher. Tragically, Colleen passed away at the age of 14 during heart surgery. Andrea greatly fostered in her children an interest in traveling, a love for the arts and education, and a general sense of inspiration and drive. With her 7 grandchildren, Andrea enjoyed encouraging creativity, reading, playing games, making music, baking, and even feeding them ice cream before dinner. In 1961, Andrea began teaching the 1st through 3rd grades with a provisional license at Grand Portage Reservation Elementary School, the last log school building in Minnesota at the time. Andrea graduated from the University of Minnesota Duluth with a degree in early education in 1969. In 1971, she was recognized as a leader in American elementary education for her contributions to the advancement of elementary education and her service to the community. This accolade marked the beginning of Andrea's substantial impact on the educational landscape of the area. As reported in the June 10, 1996 Cook County News Herald, when Andrea began teaching, it was still widely believed that Native Americans should assimilate into white culture. However, her work at Grand Portage Elementary School emphasized Native history and culture, making her one of the first Minnesota teachers to advocate against the assimilation of Native students and for the preservation of their cultural identity. As of 1976, all Grand Portage Elementary School students were immersed in Native American culture and language, with Andrea leading that change. After 15 years of teaching at Grand Portage Elementary School, Andrea, at the age of 37, was one of the 180 nominees from 150 communities in the 13th Annual Minnesota Teacher of the Year competition, sponsored by the Minnesota Education Association, the Minnesota State Fair, and the Minnesota Congress of Parents, Teachers, and Students. Andrea won the award that year, and following that honor, Andrea became one of the 4 finalists for the 1977 National Teacher of the Year. 2 years later, in 1979, Andrea received the National Education Association's Leo Reno Memorial Award for her leadership in resolving social problems, particularly those affecting individuals of American Indian and Alaskan Native heritage. Venoy G. Luth, Cook County Superintendent in 1976, remarked that Andrea has been a most successful teacher in a situation that many not be able to handle, and praised her numerous contributions to the local community. The National Education Association recognized Andrea as committed to preparing her students for all aspects of life they will encounter in today's mixed culture. In 1979, Andrea was among several Minnesotans who received high honors during the 117th National Education Association annual meeting. Part of her recognition came from assisting Grand Portage Elementary School and others in becoming involved in programs that enabled them to learn about federal legislation for funding. In 1996, Andrea was included in the National Education Association's Women Historical Biography. She shares this honor with 355 other women from across the country whose commitment to education makes their stories worth consideration and attention. The biography results from a mandate by the NEA Board of Directors in 1993 to create a meaningful record of women's contributions to NEA history at a national level. Peterson joined such luminaries as Susan B. Anthony, Maria Montessori, Helen Keller, Annie Sullivan, Krista McAuliffe, and Hillary Rodham Clinton in the biography. Eventually, Andrea went on to teach at Sawtooth Elementary School. After dedicating nearly 3 decades to teaching in Cook County, Andrea retired. Throughout her tenure, she created positive and lasting impacts on countless students, families, and school staff members. In 2007, Andrea published A Second Look, Native Americans in Children's Books, a comprehensive review of 425 books about Native Americans. Her book serves as a guide for parents, teachers, librarians, and administrators to evaluate the suitability of children's literature regarding indigenous peoples. Andrea wrote, "On a daily basis, children must face the hidden curriculum that lets them know where they fit in, whether they can achieve their goals, whether they even dare to dream. An overwhelming part of that hidden curriculum begins with books that are more narrative and illustrations. They are books that carry a message of politics and values." She reviewed books with older copyrights because they remain on library shelves and are available online. Reading these older books helped her to understand how adults have formed ideas about Native people. She remarked, "After all, if it's in a book in the library, people believe it to be true. It's time to disturb the peace and end the ritual of damage." Andrea loved literature, and after spending her earlier years devouring murder mysteries, she would go on to publishing 3 of her crime novels featuring Laurel Gilstead mysteries. They were Northern Explosion, Murder for Mayor, and Jolly Old St. Nick. She also contributed writings to the Women's Times, a magazine published in Cook County by Jane Lynn of Women's Times Publishing from 1978 to 1981, and the 1984 annual. The Historical Society is currently working with Jane Lynn and her daughters on recording and sharing many of these stories. Andrea Peterson became the first woman mayor of Grand Marais in 1992, a landmark achievement occurring 89 years after the city was founded in 1903. She served from 1992 to 2002, completing nearly 4 terms in office. During her tenure, Andrea played a pivotal role in securing 2 significant conservation easements for city-owned land, one for 60 acres along the shore and another in downtown, where a parcel previously occupied by the Stander Stations was developed into a park. This conservation effort stands out as one of the most impactful accomplishments as mayor. Andrea Peterson played a crucial role in collaborating with the Trust of Public Land, the Minnesota Land Trust, and the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources to acquire the last privately owned piece of the historic Grand Marais Harbor. This acquisition preserved the site, which had housed a standard service station for 75 years. ensuring it remained open for public use and completed the vision of a protected parkway along St. Lake Superior's harbor. The project, a unique private-public partnership, was funded by donations from the community supporters, the Anderson and Blandon Foundations, and a Minnesota DNR grant, with the Erickson family lands value donation being pivotal. As Peterson noted, this effort exemplified the community's vision for preserving the lakeshore for future generations, and the resulting park area is now a cherished community space. Beyond her exemplary teaching and service as mayor, Andrea was deeply involved in her community, participated in numerous organizations and initiatives. She served as an active board member for the Grand Marais Public Library, the Schroeder Area Historical Society, Sugarloaf, the North Shore Stewardship Association. Andrea also volunteered with the Grand Marais Cook County Economic Development Authority, Cook County Historical Society, League of Anishinaabe Women, Head Start, Save Lake Superior Association, Sons of Norway, PTA, Garden Club, Halloween Carnival, and Sunday School Teaching, and Adult Basic Education. In 2012, Andrea Peterson received the Tombola Award from Sugarloaf, the North Shore Stewardship Association, for her significant contributions to preserving the North Shore's unique environment, and her connections to Grand Portage were crucial in collaborating with the Grand Portage Band of Lake Superior Chippewa to produce an oral history book where she served as the first project manager. Today, we are honored to share the inspiring story of Andrea M. Peterson, whose remarkable journey and significant contributions to education, civic service, and conservation have left a lasting impact on our community. She was a dedicated educator, community leader, and an exceptional person who helped shape our community. Thank you, and I now introduce Aaliyah Markson.
My name is Aaliyah Markson, and I am honored to be sharing the story of Betsy Bowen, dedicated community member and volunteer who has had lasting influence on Cook County through years of volunteer efforts and art donations which benefited local causes. She is, of course, also a prolific artist and illustrator. Betsy is the oldest of 3 girls born to Ernie Olson and Betty Lovejoy Olson. Her father was a civil engineer and her mother a cartographer who met in 1930s Chicago. Ernie and Betty married in 1938, after which Ernie worked in Europe as an engineer during World War II. Betsy was born after his return in 1947. When Betsy was 5, they moved from downtown Chicago to a small commuter town, where she attended school and would take dance classes from a woman named Laura Grant. Grant would travel to Grand Marais in the summer and teach dance there, and that was how Betsy's family learned of our small town. Betsy's parents had a fondness for the outdoors and eagerly began taking their family there on vacations in the 1960s. They soon knew they wanted to put down roots and purchased a 1930s homestead to use as their getaway. Throughout this time, Betsy was always encouraged by her parents to pursue art. Her earliest memory is of receiving a box of crayons as a gift. While in Grand Marais, she would take classes at the art colony, including from Bernie Quick, Harvey Turner, and local art teacher John Spellman. Betsy met her husband, Jim Bowen, while attending college in Sarasota, Florida. She attended New College and the Ringling School of Art there. They married and in 1969 moved to the family homestead in Grand Marais to live full-time. Jim Bowen worked at the lumber mill and then the hospital, while Betsy put her art career on hold while she raised their 3 boys. Their homestead was completely functional, and there were days when everything put on their dinner table had come from their land. In the late 70s, Betsy and their family decided to move to Arizona to be closer to the Bowen grandparents. There, Betsy got a job designing telephone book ads for the Yellow Pages, which was her first real art job. When her family returned to Cook County in the 80s, Betsy began part-time work at the Sievertson Art Gallery, as well as working seasonally at the Lutsen Ski Hill and continuing commercial design work. Then, in 1988, Betsy took up an opportunity to caretake an old fishery on Isle Royale. While there, she created a woodblock print every week, sending them back to display at Sievertson's. They caught the eye of senior editor for Little Brown Children's Books of Boston, Ann Ryder, who reached out to Betsy about making a children's book. Betsy, who had already illustrated one book, jumped at the chance. The first book, Antler Bear Canoe, was published in 1991. By 2003, Betsy had illustrated or authored and illustrated 10 books. As Betsy began her full-time art career, she was working out of a rental cabin that she owned, as well as the print shop in the art colony, helping them develop their printmaking program in the process. At this time, Stacy Drouillard joined in as her first office manager. Then, in 2002, Betsy purchased the old First Norwegian Evangelical Lutheran Church, which had housed the Grand Marais Playhouse. It needed quite a bit of work, but with support from friends and community members, she was able to give it a much-needed update, including evicting the pigeons. You can still find Betsy's studio there today at 301 First Avenue West. Betsy has had a lasting influence on Cook County in more ways than one, and I'd like to cover just a couple of those here. First, of course, is the summer solstice celebration. In the mid-'80s, Betsy took a solo trip to Santa Fe, where she saw an art exhibit and festival in which an enormous effigy of Old Man Gloom was burned. Inspired, Betsy began inviting guests to her homestead around Thanksgiving and hosting a bonfire in which gloomies were burned in a cathartic ceremony. Over the years, it began to grow into a larger community event with a potluck, script, and costumes. The year 200 attendees showed up and the homestead septic system failed was the year she decided they needed a change of venue. That was right around when the North House Folk School had moved to its current location and a partnership was formed. The summer solstice event began with the first wooden boat show in 1998. Betsy retired from the event in 2022 alongside fellow founders Barb Levine and Jim Ore. Betsy was also fundamental in the conception of the Cook County Co-op. She and others in the community had begun yearning for more sovereignty over their food sources, especially things like rice and tea that couldn't be grown locally. Alternative food movements were in the early stages around the state, and inspired by those co-ops, in 1970, Betsy and a group of locals began organizing trips to warehouses in the cities to buy bulk quantities of food, which were then purchasable in small measured quantities through her homestead. It was very informal at first, just a gathering of people who wanted more transparency in their food sources, coming together and making a change. Betsy and her family's decision to make that move to Arizona to be near the Bowen grandparents was what prompted the decision by the remaining club members to seek out a permanent location and formalize into a real co-op. Betsy was also involved with the aforementioned Women's Times, a publication by women and for women in Cook County. Betsy had experience with graphic layout from working in her high school newspaper, and later from other jobs like that of the Yellow Pages. She was involved in the very beginning, but after she and her family returned from Arizona, she dove in fully, providing many illustrations and even some written articles. When I asked what other involvements she thought were worth mentioning, Betsy brought up the Thanksgiving community dinner. She and her husband had been inspired by college friends, who would cook up Thanksgiving dinner, set the table for 20 people, and then went out to find anyone who looked like they needed a hot meal to invite in to eat. That lay the foundational spark for what would become the community Thanksgiving dinner, which is still offered today by the First Congregational Church. The first motto on their early posters, which of course Betsy made, were "No charge, no sermon," emphasizing that everyone was welcome and there was no requirement for attendance. Today, Betsy is still hard at work at her studio, making art and uplifting other artists in their own artistic journeys. She remains an irreplaceable community member, one that Cook County is lucky to have. Thank you for listening to the second annual Cook County Historical Society presentation of Stories That Matter, Women of Cook County. If you enjoyed this, mark your calendars for next year, August 7th, 2025, for another round of women's stories. Or check out any of our historical sites. Whether you want to view art at the JHP Art Gallery or get into local history at the Cook County History Museum, there's something for everyone to enjoy.